the table, and then I think it might be back.
Okay.
Okay, welcome, Zach Vorhies, to the Bitcoin Future Online Conference. How are you today?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Excellent. So you have a very interesting story. However, in Europe, it's not that far spread yet. So it's a big pleasure and honor actually to have you on board. And for those who really absolutely don't know nothing about you, to introduce you quick, so you have been a Google employee, found out some really pressing truth, and now you are basically pretty much in journalism also. So give an introduction about your story, please.
Yeah, so my name is Zach Vorhies. I was a Google engineer for 8.5 years. I caught Google censoring the internet when they said that they weren't. I saw them use blacklists when they were testifying under oath to Congress that they were not using these things. And then I caught Google deleting words out of the translation dictionary in order to make our president's tweets sound crazy. I realized this was a sedition. I realized that by not doing anything, I would be complicit in sedition. So I started collecting documents about Google's censorship regime, which is called Machine Learning Fairness. And I delivered 950 pages to the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and I disclosed it to the public via a media company called Project Veritas. And so now the conspiracy theories have turned into conspiracy fact.
The tweet that you mentioned, it's the Kofife tweet, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I think most people, they were just laughing, at the misspelling. They weren't looking at it on a deeper level at all. So maybe you could give the whole story to that tweet.
Right. So in May of 2017, President Trump went to meet with people in Saudi Arabia. And when he came back, he tweeted the following: despite the constant negative press, Kafefe. Now, translate.google.com would translate this word prior to June 1st, 2017, as "we will stand up." And some Christians have noted that the term actually goes before the into the antediluvian age, where it meant we will stand up to those that are fallen. And so a bunch of users were able to decode this tweet. Despite the negative constant press, we will stand up. And so the internet kind of like blew up with this. And then the New York Times decided that they were going to write an article saying that the word was actually nonsense. And to prove this, they contacted someone that specialized in Arabic studies. But what they didn't tell the reader was that this person had been a previous contractor with New York Times. So the New York Times called up their own employee and said, "Hey, is what we're saying true?" And they said yes. And so as a result, they said this is absolute nonsense. The same day, a Google executive used the New York Times article in order to make a design document that said we need to remove this word kafefe because we're in the wrong, and the New York Times is right saying that it's nonsense. So they removed the word. They removed the word from the Arabic translation dictionary, and then 7 days later, the mainstream media in the United States was making the case that the president was mentally incapacitated because he was tweeting nonsense, and therefore should be removed by the 25th Amendment of the United States.
And maybe here we should also mention that you're not advocating for either political side, right? It's independent from political belief. But here what we have is a manipulation, clear manipulation. Maybe walk us through a bit other censorship facts that you discovered.
Yeah, so the project that Google uses is called Machine Learning Fairness. It's a type of artificial intelligence. And the way that it works is that they've got these simulated brain neurons, and these neurons are trained to perform a type of classification. So, for example, a machine learning algorithm could take a picture and tell you how much or how likely there is that this picture represents a cat or a dog. Okay? And so we would call that like a dog algorithm or dog classifier. So what Google is doing is that they are creating this machine learning algorithm to classify articles on the internet as hate speech, right? So you give it an article and then it spits back a number between 0 and 1, 0 being no hate speech and 1 being like absolutely filled to the brim with hate speech. And that's how these classifiers are made. They named it fairness because they wanted to choose a word where if you protested against it, then you were like the bad guy, right? And so I discovered this project. It came out of Stanford. It's been sort of like in slow development for many, many years. And Google decided that after the election of Donald Trump, that they were going to just take this project, move it full speed into all of their products. I'm talking Google Search, I'm talking Google News, I'm talking YouTube. And they had this like silent disclosure of it. Like they put up the links to the internal internet, and they had this. It was a huge program. Like it had a lot of subcomponents. Something called Project Purple Rain. They had something called Twiddler, which re-ranked all the YouTube videos. And ProFair was another one of these subcomponents, and it was massive, and nobody was talking about it. The faculty, the executives at the company weren't really talking about this at TGIF, but I would be able to see all this progress that was happening. I was able to do internal searches and see that the project was, expanding. And so I just said, I got to check this thing out. And as I looked through it, I realized that, wow, they're saying some really messed up stuff. And so I decided that I was just going to start downloading it because this stuff was so far out there. I knew that if I started telling people, and I actually, did tell some close friends, but they thought that this was absolutely crazy. They were like, there's no way that Google's doing this. You're making stuff up. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to copy this, for my own sanity. So I started downloading all these documents, and this was kind of like a side project for me. I would read these documents when I got home, figure out like, there's like a keyword that I don't know. I'd search for it. I'd find what that system is, and I kept on expanding the search ring until I had a treasure trove of documents. In the summer of 2017 is when I discovered the Covfefe thing that Google was doing. And so I decided at that point that I needed to start looking out for a media company to help me disclose this, because I couldn't just, give it to the DOJ or law enforcement, because if I just gave it to them, then, they might sit on it, or Google might, or one of their moles might say, hey, look, Google, this guy gave us a bunch of your documents, and then they would figure me out, and then something bad might happen. I realized that I had to both disclose to the DOJ and I had to disclose to the public so that public pressure would allow this thing to be investigated. And so, in the fall of, 2017, I really started to look hard, and my network, introduced me to Breitbart, and Breitbart said, this is actually something that's bigger than what we can do. You need to contact Project Veritas. I contacted Project Veritas. They sent over a handler, and after earning my trust, I gave them a huge cache of the documents. They sent it back, and then Project Veritas sat on it for almost 2 years. And so, so they sat on it. The way that Google censors the internet or downrank stuff is that for one, they have this machine learning fairness thing that operates in all these different products that they have: Google News, Google Search, and YouTube. But what I also found out towards the end of this project was the fact that Google was actually ranking all of the websites according, and get this, according to what Wikipedia had to say about the topic, person, or website. So for those of you that see that, your rankings are going down, check what Wikipedia has to say about you or your website or your product.
Yeah, it's big news. Most people use Google, and they see the white page, right? And white is also like is the color of technology and of trust and of innocence maybe. And like Google always has been really simple and came up with amazing products, and that's how they, I think, managed to become so big. Now, still, people see Google as the go-to place to find good results, and they trust that. And it does work, right? Like if I have
Yes.
a technical search, there is no problem with that. The problem comes when, I actually want to find out the truth, maybe about certain events in the world, or compared also to Bitcoin, right? Like in 2017, for example, the Bitcoin was the most trending word, and then also this huge bubble hype basically happened. So probably they did their part, maybe also over pushing it, overselling it. Who knows? It can't be trusted anymore. If they manipulate on that level, then what do you think? How deep could this really go? Like it's on which areas of life should we be careful when we Google, basically?
Politics. Anything involving politics, Google seems to have a fetish for rigging the results, and especially elections. Google can't keep their hand out of the cookie jar, and which is really insane when you think about it, given that if Google represents a systemic threat to the political order, then it's either Google's going to survive or the nation's going to survive. And so the very fact that they would have a dog in this fight, like, blew my mind. And I was like, what exactly explains what's going on there? Why would the executives of the company risk the stock value of their company for some election that they've got no bone in the fight for? Right? So this started like a whole sort of like going down the rabbit hole and figuring out what was really happening. What I found out is that there's sort of a cult that runs the world. You guys, this may be common knowledge. It's becoming incredibly common knowledge now in the United States. Like half the people in the United States, I can now say, oh yeah, the Illuminati are doing this or that. And at this point, like half of America's like they just accept it, because we've all seen the globalists, we've all seen the wars, we've all seen the lies, and the only thing that describes all this is if there's a coherent, long-range plan in order to control the United States and to control Europe and control the resources of the planet. And so, according to this cult that runs the world, call them the Illuminati, call them the network of global corporate control, it's all the same thing. They have a plan, they've got an agenda for the world, and they're using Google as a proxy in order to implement their agenda. That's the reason why they're meddling in these elections and threatening the very existence of the company. The thing is that the stockholders that are running the company, they see the company as, ultimately an extension of power, not as something that generates wealth for the stockholders.
Yeah, I saw a tweet recently from Joshua Shigala, and he said there was this video going viral from the Chinese in China, where the guy is like in an interview, and he's on this chair, handcuffed, and they ask him why he was talking bad about the police. And they tell him that they found this in this WeChat group, right? So we see kind of methods that we know from dictatorships in Germany, for example. The Nazis, of course, used this kind of torture and like this interview style, which is like really pressing, or also in the Soviet, right? And so that's really, tyrannical scenarios that are happening now based on online surveillance. So how important is it now to encrypt data to stay private online?
I hate to say this, but most encryption methods are broken. And I was told by military intelligence that they've got computers that can break any encryption within minutes. I knew this woman who dated this guy who was a mathematician. He figured out how the NSA was cracking all the codes, and then he died under mysterious circumstances like a few months later. And so, from what I've heard, most of the encryption out there that's provided by the NSA or these agencies are broken by default. They've got some sort of sophisticated mathematical flaw that shrinks the key space down to something that's very, very small. I also know from talking to a lot of Bitcoin miners that there is a quantum computer that exists somewhere that's far beyond what's been disclosed to the public, and they're using this quantum machine to steal Bitcoins out of different wallets. They don't use it widespread. They use it selectively when they want to. But I find it really strange that the hashing algorithm that they used for Bitcoin was selected, and it also happened to be quantum weak. There's a lot of different types of hashing algorithms that exist out there that are quantum strong, where quantum computers just you can't run them. But the SHA-256 was quantum weak, and they chose it. And the very fact that they chose it means that the coin will have to be forked to a different technology in order to be useful and secure. And so right now, I believe that a lot of what we think is actually secure is actually broken by design, and that what's going to happen is that we're going to have a period of what I call cryptographic archaeology, where Intel corporations use different methods in order to mine through all this encrypted data and take a peek inside and see what everyone was doing, all your bank accounts, all the text messages, everything that you have is going to be mined in the future if it's not being mined already, which I think it probably is. And so what we really need to do is we need to figure out a standard that is cryptographically strong against quantum computers. I figured out how to do this by an algorithm that generates a one-time pad, just a string of what looks like random zeros and ones, and then you XOR that against your code, and then boom, you've got the ability to send information that can never ever be decrypted by any standard thing. They have to figure out how you're generating that one-time pad, which is an NP complete problem. And so I think that cryptography can be made secure again, and I think that should be done, and I think that we need to have something like that if we're truly going to have secure communications and monetary exchange.
Cool. So what other basic alternatives and ways to protect and defend basically do you recommend right now, and what people use for research maybe, and also as a last question, how can people learn more about your work?
So I don't really know what a good crypto is. I haven't actually looked into something that's secure in terms of cryptocurrency, and so I don't I honestly think people should.
Yeah, we will probably discuss this. We have a few people in the conference, that would argue that Bitcoin actually is pretty easy to make quantum proof, and it's not a big issue. So we can actually have a panel discussion on that and discuss.
We need to get all that as quickly as possible, right? We need to make that thing secure if it's really going to be able to challenge established power. I
think that the people in Bitcoin, especially the ones who are working on it, on the core protocol, they are pretty aware of how broken the internet is, and some of them also really deeply in cryptography for years. So I think I hope they're aware, but we should definitely discuss it because it's of course one of the most important things.
Absolutely. And as far as people looking at my disclosure, they can follow me on twitter.com/perpetualmaniac. They can also type in perpetualmaniac.com, or they can use my name, ZachVorhies.com. And that's going to bring you to any of the landing pages that I've got out there. I've got the whole set of Google Docs disclosed through a link. And it's 950 pages. And man, it will blow your mind what Google thought about us. They think that we are programmed individuals. And in fact, if you can insert a slide, that would be great to show. It's like a
the flowchart with the algorithm.
It's like content is generated and like filtered and then like aggregated, and then like the final step is that people like us are programmed, and then it restarts the process so that the program people generate new content that's more suitable according to Google's corporate goals, and they just use this cycle and play it over and over and over again until there's a society that is fair and just according to Google's cultural values. It's dystopian.
Yeah, so take the blue pill and you will stay in the world and believe whatever you want, or watch this interview and learn how Google manipulates the world. Zach, thank you so much for this work that you do and the risk that you take also, of course. Again, it's a big pleasure, and I'm really grateful that you're on board and doing this. And we hope we can support you in a way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. Been a pleasure.